This is macOS Ken.
iPhone replacements may be lengthening again. Think pieces from a couple of financial analysts, and Apple has found and fired a leaker. It is Thursday, the 11th of May, 2023. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from macOS Ken. Brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Go to hellofresh.com/MOK16 and use code MOK16 for 16 free meals plus free shipping. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSCan. It's kind of weird that any part of the pandemic could be seen as a golden age, but it seems to have been for consumer electronics, including iPhone. Technically, I don't know that we can say the pandemic is over, but certainly we are acting like it's over, so that also ends the golden age. 9 to 5 Mac has new numbers from Consumer Intelligence Research Partners, or CIRP, that show consumers, presumably in the US, holding onto their iPhones longer. From 2019 to 2021, the piece says, Apple customers kept their phones longer and longer, with 34% of them having an iPhone that was 3 years of age or older. Somewhere in there, the pandemic set in, and new electronics seemed like a great idea. Last year was the apparent heyday for upgrades. Quoting 9 to 5 Mac, an explanation of all the upgrades that appeared to happen in 2022, CIRP believes it was likely a mix of COVID-induced iPhone purchases, government stimulus checks, and the interruption of travel and entertainment spending that helped consumers afford newer models. Now, of course, we got no stimulus checks, macroeconomic uncertainty, and stuff to do outside the home that costs money, and I'm not just talking about the higher price for groceries. Whether driven by worry over bad times or the lack of economic good times, people seem to be holding onto their iPhones longer again. In March of 2021, a CIRP survey found 65% of respondents holding onto their iPhones for 2 years or longer. In March of 2022, CIRP says only 53% of survey respondents were keeping their iPhones for 2 years or more. Running the same survey this year, CIRP says the number is creeping toward the 2021 level. 61% of respondents are now holding their iPhones for 2 years or more, according to the firm. I am loving a new note from analysts at Morgan Stanley, not just because it's something I've been wanting/predicting for quite a while, but okay, mostly it is that. Apple MOSK has analysts at Morgan Stanley saying Siri plus large language model AI capabilities could create truly personal virtual assistants for Apple users. You probably have some idea what a large language model, or LLM, is, but just in case, a definition from Microsoft says LLM AI is a term that refers to artificial intelligence models that can generate natural language texts from large amounts of data. Large language models use deep neural networks, such as transformers, to learn from billions or trillions of words and to produce texts on any topic or domain. One thing that might hinder Apple's virtual assistant is the Cupertino company's commitment to user privacy. However, Morgan Stanley says Apple is in a strong position to enable personal, on-device assistants that span a wide variety of potential use cases. According to Apple MOSK, the analysts explain that by combining the on-device machine learning power of Apple's neural engine with on-device access to personal data held on the device, the company could create a unique and private solution likely to turn Apple's virtual assistant from zero to hero. The Morgan Stanley analysts lay out an illustration that includes Apple's virtual assistant reminding users about texts or calls to which they've not responded. It can also remind them about upcoming birthdays, anniversaries, or Mother's Day, which is this Sunday. Seriously, it's Sunday. Don't forget. Like Google, write the analysts, Apple could also leverage its relationship with developers by granting an LLM-based Siri access to applications. In the Mother's Day example, Apple's virtual assistant could suggest ordering flowers through 1-800-Flowers, and given Apple Wallet stores your credit card and shipping information, Apple's virtual assistant could place that order for you. Of course, the question is, can they do it? Quoting the firm again, we believe Apple's virtual assistant combined with LLMs could end up being a unique personal assistant versus those from Apple and Amazon. However, Apple's AI capabilities are a question mark. Little has been said around whether Apple is building its own LLMs or if they'll decide to partner with an open source vendor such as Stability AI. Personally, my hope is for the former. We'll see. Looking at something more tangible and more easily accessible is Barclays analyst Tim Long. A piece from Barron says he is watching Apple TV+. Basically, he's against it. According to the piece, the analyst says the incremental spending on content effectively takes cash away from the $90 billion stock buyback plan that Apple announced last week. Shareholders would prefer that the company buy back more stock or increase its dividend yield over aggressive content spending for TV+. While Long indicates that Apple TV+ is showing impressive growth on both revenue and subscribers, it's going to be years before it contributes to Apple's bottom line. It's also going to cost billions. Billions that could go to millionaires and billionaires instead of being invested by Apple in Apple's future. For a guy named Long, that seems short-sighted. Now, this is going to shock you. Barclays has a neutral rating on Apple shares. Long's price target on the shares is $149. Just for fun, why don't we check? Oh, here it is. Apple shares closed Wednesday at $173.56. But please, Mr. Long, you were saying. Speaking of Apple TV+, a number of sites are sounding the alarm as an Apple exec heads for the exit. MacRumors highlights a Bloomberg report that says Apple TV+ lead Pete Destad is leaving the big round building. According to the piece, Destad is, or was, in charge of the business and operations side of the Apple TV app, Apple TV+, and Apple's sports efforts. Sounds like a lot for one person. Certainly Apple seems to think so now. The piece says the sports side of Destad's duties will be handled by a promoted Jim DeLorenzo. The company is looking for someone else to handle the TV business side, according to the report. The piece points out that Destad is the third services executive to leave the company in recent months, with his departure following services business head Peter Stern and cloud services lead Michael Abbott. Hey, remember that time Steve Jobs got fired and that was the end for Apple? Or the time Steve Jobs died and that was the end for Apple? No idea why I just thought of that. More news in a moment, but first a word from HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit and sponsor of today's show. Do you know the right time of year to cook with which produce? HelloFresh does. Their seasonal ingredients are picked at peak ripeness and travel from the farm to your home in less than 7 days, so you know they're fresh. Isn't it great to know that no matter what time of year, your HelloFresh meals feature top quality, in-season foods? You can make great meals even if you're not great in the kitchen. Recipes arrive pre-proportioned and easy to prepare in just a few steps, with clear instructions and illustrations. The meals I have made with HelloFresh have been fantastic. See what they've got for you. Go to hellofresh.com/MOK16 and use code MOK16 for 16 free meals plus free shipping. That's hellofresh.com/MOK16 and use code MOK16 for 16 free meals. Don't miss this great offer from America's #1 meal kit. Get free shipping and 16 free meals with code MOK16 at hellofresh.com/MOK16. The European Union is taking a new or renewed look at issues around Apple Pay, though to what end is unclear. A piece from Bloomberg says the European Union is examining the availability of payments solutions across mobile devices, including the use of QR codes and Bluetooth technologies as alternatives to Apple's near-field communications chip, according to two people familiar with the matter who spoke on condition of anonymity. All of this follows antitrust charges leveled against Apple by the EU a year ago. This time last year, the governing body claimed that Apple's rules around access to iPhone's NFC tech restricted competition in the market for mobile wallets on iOS devices. For its part, Apple says it ensures equal access to NFC while setting industry-leading standards for privacy and security. Now, I say the purpose of the new look is unclear. While the Bloomberg piece says Apple's tap-to-pay technology faces a fresh round of European Union antitrust scrutiny, the emphasis on QR codes and Bluetooth technologies as alternatives to Apple's NFC chip could mean the EU is seeing whether such alternatives are viable. If so, Apple's NFC hoops and hurdles might be reconsidered. It will be a bit before we know. Bloomberg says the European Commission did not respond to its request for comment. Apple has found and fixed one of its internal leaks. By fixed, I mean fired. A report from Cult of Mac says the tipster, who went by Analyst 941, leaked a large number of details about iOS 17, but their inside source was caught by Apple in a sting operation. The source has reportedly been fired, and both they and the tipster face legal action by the iPhone maker. How'd they catch who they caught? By lying to them and waiting for that lie to come back. In a since-deleted note posted by the leaker, Analyst 941 indicated that the source at Apple was told false release dates for Logic Pro and Final Cut Pro for iPad. Other employees were told different dates. When the tipster published what they had been told, Apple knew the source. Next week's macOS Ventura update appears to be bringing a fix with it. I told you last week of reports that said the fourth developer beta of macOS 13.4 had network issues. Those were apparently caused by bad interactions between content filter apps like Little Snitch and the fourth beta build. They are also apparently fixed. According to a piece from MacRumors, this week's macOS release candidate fixes that problem. macOS Ventura 13.4 is expected to be out to the masses next week. And finally today, one of Apple's services is getting smarter about another Apple service. iDownload blog says the audio recognition app Shazam can now recognize and open classical music in Apple Music Classical. According to the release notes, according to iDownload blog, Shazam for iOS and iPadOS version 15.3.3 is now live on the App Store with a single new feature: the ability to open classical songs identified with Shazam in the Apple Music Classical app. Is that Stephen Stinkin' Foster or Frederick freaking Chopin? Shazam it, gosh darn it. I'm sorry, it turns out Chopin's middle name was Francois. Apologies to the freaking Chopin family. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and sponsored by HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Go to hellofresh.com/MOK16 and use code MOK16 for 16 free meals plus free shipping. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSCan. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media. Online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. info@macoscan.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.